foreign policy with me, Robert Inlakesh, for the last American Vagabond. Today, what we're going to be talking about is something that is being discussed day after day in Palestinian and Israeli media, yet has not been picked up by the mainstream media in the Western world. And so I believe this subject is something of the utmost importance, and it will be featured eventually if this really develops into something which will reach mainstream media. Perhaps not the sort of reporting that a lot of people would like, objective reporting that breaks down the issue, that doesn't start the story in the middle. However, this topic is the bombardment or the possible future bombardment of the Gaza Strip, what would be termed a war between Gaza and Israel. So let's get right into this. So as always, when investigating issues like this, what we need to do is we need to first go back so that we can understand the present. Now, we're not going to go back into ancient history. We're not going to go back and cover the entire occupation period of Gaza and what happened in the past before that, and of course the siege and all the rest of that, although we might dive into that a little bit later on in the course of this video. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to August of this year. Now, what happened in August of this year is key to understanding what may happen in the future and is predicted to happen in the coming months. And that is the bombardment of Gaza, again, a possible war escalation, a situation which is really, like I stated at the start of this video, is of the utmost importance to everyone that cares about human rights, because there is a huge possibility that if this escalates into the war, thousands of people could be massacred inside the Gaza Strip, massive loss of human life. And of course, the factions in Gaza now are stronger than they've ever been. So even on the Israeli side, there will be a larger loss of life than there was in the past. This will mean an adverse reaction from Israel, most likely, which will cause even more death inside of the Gaza Strip due to their superior technology, their ability to kill people on a larger scale than what Palestinians can of the Israeli side. So in August, there was a 19-day period where Israel basically bombarded the Gaza Strip every single night or early morning time, and some strikes during the day. And during this period, which started, by the way, from the 11th of August, and then later on the 13th of August, Israel closed the sole humanitarian aid crossing into Gaza, which meant that basically the Gaza Strip was, on a verge of an absolute complete collapse. We have to know as well that the Gaza Strip has been declared by the United Nations as of this year, 2020, experts at the UN, not my words, to be completely unlivable. What happened in the Gaza Strip during that 19-day bombardment period basically meant that the sewage system was not functional. The power had completely gone off. There were things like 38-hour blackouts. Some people no electricity at all. A lot of people don't even have any access. Hundreds of thousands of people, in fact, in Gaza don't have access to a direct water supply. And so when you have your sole humanitarian aid crossing closed, this makes the situation a lot worse. It looked like it was going to go into a full-scale war situation at that point. Israel had basically engaged in this and changed its rules of engagement in Gaza from what it had in the past, just suddenly changed its approach to what it was doing in Gaza, acted a lot more violently in reaction to what it called terror balloons. Terror balloons basically, in reality, are balloons set off by young men and really teenagers who go out and attach burning objects to balloons, fly them up in the air. They go over the separation fence between Gaza and Israel, and they drop into land and basically burn it. Burn, grassland, they burn farmland, trees and the likes of this. And the reason why this was going on at such a large scale, and lots of these balloons were being sent, which caused a problem for Israel, was because of the fact that Hamas, which is the elected government in Gaza, basically decided that it's not going to go after these people. It's going to allow them to do it. It's going to allow everyone, and it's not going to stop anyone from sending these balloons to pressure Israel. Something that we should understand about this as well is the fact that these people who are in the Gaza Strip, who are sending these balloons with firing objects, and sometimes there's been the odd occasion, which not many occasions, but the odd occasion where there is a small handmade explosive device which has killed nobody, often don't explode and all the rest of this, which is sent over, is because of the fact that the people in Gaza are suffering immensely. And so the situation there is so horrific that they want to pressure Israel to get better terms, and the people want this as well, genuinely. Now, also, another factor to this is understanding that these people sending the balloons, Gaza is a population which is over 70% a refugee population from those areas where it's actually sending the balloons into the majority of the time. So they're actually burning the lands which the Israeli settlers are on, which took their lands and, of course, forced them into the Gaza Strip. That's something also key to understanding it from a Palestinian perspective when they're doing this. But understanding the whole situation with Hamas doing this, Hamas was doing it in order to pressure Israel to get better terms, like the people wanted and were demanding inside of Gaza, so that they could just live slightly better lives. And so basically what happened is the situation escalated within these 19 days. They bombarded many different areas. Hamas eventually, and the other armed factions inside of the Gaza Strip, eventually changed their rules of engagement to the point where if Israel was going to bomb any site in Gaza, they would send a rocket back. That was the strategy. And to an extent, it started pressuring Israel to ease off on the targets which it was trying to strike. And in that respect, it was a little bit of a win in terms of Israel didn't really want to take the heat. At that time, it wasn't really prepared to go into a full-scale military confrontation at that time. It didn't seem that they were seeking to do that. Wasn't really politically viable at that time for them to do as such. So this resulted eventually, after a few days of an outbreak of COVID-19 in the Gaza Strip, the big story came out, and this put pressure on these mediators, like, for instance, Egypt and Qatar, to seal a truce between Israel and Gaza. So a truce was sealed between Israel and Gaza. And this was a mutual understanding that if Israel was allowed to allow more aid from Qatar to come in, humanitarian aid to come in, then Hamas would stop people from sending these balloons and there would be no fighting between the two sides. Now, that broke down on two occasions where there was a trade of fire between Gaza Strip and Israel. But other than that, it's the truce has been maintained. So there hasn't been a huge escalation between the two sides. But at this point, it does look like, despite the fact that there's been negotiations with Qatar to bring in more money, it does look like the situation in Gaza is significantly deteriorating at this point. The living conditions are horrific. And so some of the demands that Hamas are making are basically the rebuilding of the sole operational power plant there, and it's semi-operational, and also the resumption of civil projects. Of course, above and beyond all is the ending of the siege, and it does look as if Israel does not hold its side of the deal and ensure that there are better conditions for the people in the Gaza Strip, and it is obligated to do so under international law, by the way, as it is an occupying force. The entire world considers it as an occupying force, other than the United States Trump administration and Israel itself. They, of course, would just take the line that it's not an occupation because Israel withdrew. But what happened in reality is it blockaded the Gaza Strip immediately afterwards. And it is an externally occupying force. So it still occupies the airspace, it still occupies the magnetic space, it still occupies the territories, what comes in and out, and it can decide the fate of Gaza really to a large degree. Like we see, for instance, it can close down the sole humanitarian aid crossing, it can stop fuel from coming in, which will mean that this will affect things like, for instance, the sewage facilities. There, not enough power, you can't pump out sewage, it's just going to run into the streets. The semi-operational power plant, I say semi-operational because it was bombed, other power plants were bombed and just completely destroyed. And of course, with no fuel, it's not going to be able to generate power. And so you have these massive periods of blackouts in the Gaza Strip during this 19-day bombardment period. So, understanding all of this, we understand the situation which is going on now inside of the Gaza Strip. For instance, 97% of the water is completely unfit for human consumption. Like I had just mentioned, the United Nations, experts at the United Nations have declared Gaza as completely unlivable. So these are things that we have to take into consideration. And we also have to take into consideration that what did Hamas want? Hamas wanted, and what it demands, is actually what international law says, and also it's very reasonable. You know, we always get this story presented, and this is why we need to go into the history, and we need to look at different aspects of this, which often are not revealed on the mainstream media, of course, because the truth lies there. If you're looking at the demands of Hamas, and not just the propaganda about how horrible they are and all the rest of it, and how they're so much worse than Israel, you'll see that their demands in all of this is that they are allowed more humanitarian aid, that their society can function better if more projects are allowed to go on, if more aid is allowed to come in, which Israel should at the very least be allowing. And the conditions inside of the Gaza Strip at the moment are a violation of international law, and there's no doubt about it. So what they're demanding is just that they're not even granted their full rights, just part of their rights. And this is not a reasonable ask for Israel. Israel doesn't see that as a reasonable thing. And so, of course, you can just scrap the thought of them ending the siege at this point. They can't even help ease the humanitarian situation there. Now, to enter the next part of this video, I think it's very key to understand the situation that's ongoing inside of Israel right now. So, for those of you that actually have been looking into this or that read the Israeli media, you might know that these anti-Netanyahu protests have been ongoing for months and months now. And they have really picked up in numbers. For instance, just a week ago, within the space of 1 week, it was approximately 150,000 Israelis took to the streets to protest Netanyahu. We had these videos emerging time and time again of people outside of Netanyahu's house and trying to break down these barricades to sort of get in. You know, the question has emerged, what would happen if Palestinians did this? Well, we know they would be shot dead. Lethal force would be used immediately. However, nobody's been killed in the Israeli protests yet. Hundreds of thousands of people have been protesting at this moment. We're going to leave that to the side, however. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis on the streets. Netanyahu's got his corruption charges and this trial that's ongoing. Of course, this could pan out over a long period, so it's not likely that he's going to go to jail anytime soon. However, it's absolutely pressure. And groups from all over the Israeli society, because it's a very divided society inside of Israel. There's many different groups who completely disagree with each other. And you can see this reflected in who is voted into the Israeli Knesset or government. Throughout its history, there's never been a unified, a majority government. It's always been a government of multiple parties. So you've had to form a coalition in order to come into government. You know, you don't just get the majority voting for a party like Likud or Labour, etc. It doesn't happen like that in Israel. So something that we have to keep in mind now is during this COVID-19 crisis and the lockdowns and all the rest of it that's been going on, economic pressure has been put on certain segments of the Israeli society. Some of those segments of the Israeli society, one of them included, is the Misrahi population, or Jewish people of Middle Eastern descent. Now, this is very key because they are under this, this economic distress, and they come under this economic pressure. And a lot of Misrahi voters will go and vote. They make up a large portion of people that vote for Netanyahu. And so there's a lot of protesters out there, which are traditional Netanyahu supporters who are now against him because of what's happened in terms of economics in the country and the economic hardships that they face, businesses closing down, things like this. And of course, there's a hierarchy inside of Israel of which groups, in terms of the Jewish population, the Palestinian population are right beneath that. But in terms of the Jewish population, which groups are on top? And of course, Jews of Middle Eastern descent are discriminated against. And on top of that, also we have to factor in another thing into this, is that there is around 12% of the population are ultra-Orthodox Jews. And so the ultra-Orthodox population right now has been actually clashing with Israeli police. A lot of groups who identify as ultra-Orthodox have been breaking the lockdown restrictions, attacking people based upon this, breaking down barriers, not wearing masks, stuff like this. And so the situation there with them and the economic situation getting more dire, they've been affected to a large extent, and a lot of them feel left out, disenfranchised, etc. And there's a number of ways that they are discriminated against, which is often actually not mentioned. A lot of people don't actually know this, that the ultra-Orthodox population is discriminated against. And this is deep-rooted, and I'm not going to go into the whole history of this. But just to give you a taste of it all, you know, Israel is made up of groups, most of which join the army. When it comes to the ultra-Orthodox population, they can get an exemption in order to not join the army. Now, this comes up every election period, basically. And there's election campaigns ran on this, the promise of drafting ultra-Orthodox into the military. And if you look at the Haredi population, not many of them will go and join the military. And they don't believe in these ideas like, for instance, a lot of the rest of Israeli society of, you know, the power and, let's say, the importance of the government, or the importance of the idea of it being a state in this modern framing that we have it in. You know, the way that they view life is through a religious lens. And so there's been clashes there. And so in a situation where, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric about a civil war going on inside of Israel, or you know, developing into that situation. In this situation, I don't personally believe that there's any indication of a full-blown civil war going on, however, or you know, it developing into this situation. However, I do think it's a volatile situation for Netanyahu, and the way that he could get a lot of people on board and, you know, back into his camp and supporting him is to unify them through an offensive action against perhaps the Gaza Strip. That is where, if this is the strategy that is, and this is of course speculation at this point, if they're going to go anywhere, Gaza Strip would probably be the #1 target. After that, they still also have to keep into consideration that Netanyahu has to keep into consideration that Hezbollah in Lebanon is promising to attack Israel and take the life of at least one of its soldiers, and avenge the fact that South Lebanon has been hit, it's been struck, it's been attacked, and one of the members called Ali Mohsen, who was killed inside of Syria, a member of Hezbollah, Lebanese Hezbollah inside of Syria, that they will avenge his death. And that could escalate into a situation where we see Israel perhaps, you know, at least exchanging in and engaging in a battle with Lebanon, specifically with Hezbollah forces there. And Hezbollah is no group to mess with. On top of that, we've been seeing them attack targets inside of Syria, killing civilians and soldiers alike inside of Syria. But it's something to keep your eye on in terms of what is happening currently inside of the country, and if it gets to a situation where it looks very bad for Netanyahu, his ticket out of there may be attacking the Gaza Strip, and that's something to consider. On top of this, something else to consider, and I believe this played a large part in why Israel attacked Gaza in 2014, is Palestinian unity. Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip, is the predominant faction inside of the Gaza Strip political party. And Fatah, which is the predominant party, the party which runs the Palestinian Authority in control of different parts of the West Bank, or, you know, partial control. Of course, it's under Israeli occupation, and an internal Israeli occupation in terms of the West Bank. They've sort of came together. Fatah and Hamas have came together, and all of the factions have came together and are having discussions on a joint plan of cooperation in order to confront Israel, normalization, things like this. And it does look like the Palestinian Authority at this point is severing ties with Israel in many ways, that it is abandoning the Oslo Accords, and abandoning, above all, the most important thing for Israel is the security cooperation with Israel. And of course, if it's working together with all different factions, and they're even talking about having elections, whether this actually happens or not is another thing. These sort of Unity agreements happen all the time. There was a unity agreement signed back in 2017, completely did not pan out. But what it does is this is a threat to Israel. If all Palestinian factions align, and they take on Israel together on multiple different fronts, this presents a real problem for Israel. So if Israel wants to destroy this, a good way to destroy the relationship between Hamas and Fatah again would be to attack the Gaza Strip. Also on top of this, there is the ongoing case of the political prisoner Maher al-Ahras. Now, Maher is a father of 6. He's 49 years of age. He's currently being held in Israeli administrative detention. Now, administrative detention is detention without charge. You're held without a charge. This can be indefinite detention. They can hold you if they want to for 20, 30, whatever years they want. They don't actually need to give you a charge. And of course, even when you do get charged, it's a kangaroo court, and the conviction rate is essentially 99%. So it doesn't matter what you do in this military court. A lot of the times you're going to get convicted for something you didn't do, or get a harsh sentence regardless. And I'm not going to go too much into the prisoners now. However, in the case of Maher, he was arrested back in July of this year, and he has been on an 80-day plus hunger strike. His current condition is in deterioration, as Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem has pointed out, that he is on the verge of death, essentially. And what we need to understand in this is that if he dies, that's not the end of it. Of course, Israel has been accused time and time again of not providing what it needs to for the Palestinian political prisoners, of which there's thousands in administrative detention at the moment, held without a charge. There is almost 400 of them. And Israel will do this to minors as well. Will hold them in administrative detention without a charge. And you're seeing up on screen right now a table throughout the years of people held in administrative detention without a charge. And I've known people, I've had friends held in administrative detention for long periods of time. One of my friends, he was held for 6 months in administrative detention before they, basically cooked up a phony charge and rearrested him. And so anyway, not getting too much into that, if Maher dies inside of the Israeli prison system, he's in detention, he's in hospital now, then Israel bears full responsibility. And this is according to Palestinian armed faction Suraya al-Quds, which is part of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which operates primarily from and has the biggest base of support inside of the Gaza Strip. This video is from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement, and this is a direct threat against Israel, and talking about what they will do in retaliation for the death of the prisoner Maher.
وأحمل العدو مسؤولية حياة أي أسير منهم، وأخص بالذكر هنا الأسير المجاهد الأخ ماهر الأخرس. العدو أن يفهم تماما ما أقول.
Also, it's evident at this point as well that Islamic Jihad, having watched that video, its rockets have developed to such a great extent now that it can hit anywhere inside of Israel. And Hamas, the elected government inside of Gaza, its armed wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, Al-Qassam has even better rockets than Islamic Jihad's rockets. Now, also, on top of this, I want to pull up this report. This is straight from the Hamas website, and this is quoting Khaled Meshal, who was a former leader of Hamas, who says that also that the resistance will not let down the prisoners, the Palestinian political prisoners, and that there will be a response. And the reason why I pull this all up, and this is integral to the story, is because of the fact that it may be initiated by the death of this round of escalations, or, you know, what the sort of tit for tat that goes on before there's an operation which is launched by Israel against Gaza. This may result in a war, and of course this may be the trigger for it. So including all of these things, it's very important. Understanding the situation currently, understanding the dire circumstances under which the people of the Gaza Strip live is very important. And also, I want to finish off this video by talking about the Great Return March. And this puts things into perspective a lot more for people who are thinking at this point, oh, well, you know, they're trying to be violent and all the rest of this. The Palestinians who have been under siege, an illegal siege, a blockade for 15 years essentially now, almost 15 years, have tried literally everything you can imagine in order to have that siege lifted. And when you look at it, the situation that's going on for the people, now we're talking about the people, we're not talking about organizations, political parties, anything like that. We're talking about human beings here. 2 million people crowded into a space more densely populated than Tokyo, with a water supply which is 97% undrinkable. 300,000 plus people don't even have an access to any sort of water system there. A few hours of electricity per day, constant bombardments, buzzing of drones, sewage which will run into the street, a lack of just basic things. You know, 80+% are dependent upon international humanitarian aid. And I could go on for days and days outlining the situation here. This is a population as well, which is 70+% refugee population. This is a population out of the 2 million, over half of them are minors under the age of 18. They're living in a space which is unlivable. And in 2018, on the 30th of March, they went out to protest against Israel in their hundreds of thousands in order to break the blockade. What was painted by the mainstream media in the West as clashes at a border, which doesn't exist. There is no borders, and Israel has not declared its borders. There's no border between there and Gaza. It's an occupied territory. What happened at that time was that there were 0 Israelis, none, which were killed or significantly injured beyond scratches to sniper rifles. And the odd sniper who, you know, got an erection so hard that his leg went to sleep, to quote Frankie Boyle, the comedian over here in the United Kingdom. That's all that happened on the Israeli side. Palestinians, 330 plus unarmed demonstrators, men, women, children, the elderly, disabled people, medics and journalists, everyone you can think of in every single category, every single protected category, and outside of the protected categories, specifically protected categories, was shot dead, murdered in cold blood for protesting with no weapons. Okay? People, according to a UNHRC report, which was adopted by the UNHRC as well, voted on and adopted, people were shot whilst walking away with their backs turned hundreds of meters away while smoking cigarettes, all stuff like this. Okay? Massacred, murdered. The mainstream media painted this as clashes. Just think about those statistics I just told you. Painted the Palestinians as if they were just a bunch of animals, hordes, which were going to, you know, charge a border, which doesn't exist, there's no border. Charging the border to kill Israelis. In reality, there were layers and layers of barbed wire, a militarized fence, in some cases wall, and Israelis sitting in guard towers or behind mounds of dirt with sniper rifles picking off peaceful protesters, for the most part. That's what happened when the Palestinians uprose non-violently. And we know Israel has the capacity to not kill people like that because of the protests which are ongoing inside of Israel now. They haven't killed one protester. There's been hundreds of thousands of people on the street. People trying to break into Netanyahu's house. Could you imagine if Palestinians did that? Lethal force would be the first thing that they would think to use if it was Palestinians. Putting that all into consideration, we have to look at the situation right now, and in terms of people dying slowly, people starving, people dying of thirst, people not having the most basic necessities. Inside of the Gaza Strip, the highest unemployment rate amongst the youth in the world, one of the highest unemployment rates on the planet. This situation going on for a long time now. And the history of what they've faced at the hands of Israel. Of course they're going to resort to violence. It's the only way at this point, because everyone has let them down. The international community has let them down. The media has let them down. Everyone's let them down. Humanitarian organizations have let them down. Think about that. Non-governmental organizations, human rights organizations have lied and let them down. And at this point, the people have their backs against the wall, and it's, you know, fight, die fighting, or just sit there and die. And that's the situation right now. And everyone should have their eyes on the Gaza Strip and should understand the context behind what could be a potential escalation and another bombardment of the Gaza Strip, which could occur. This is not an absolute, but it is integral to understanding the story, the history behind it. And if it does happen, everyone needs to know this. It's very important. And this is the real context behind it. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that on the mainstream media. Unfortunately, it takes independent media to talk about these subjects. And so if you like this video and you like videos like this, then make sure you share this information around. I think that everyone needs to share the information that's being presented on channels like this around, even if it's just communicating it by word, because this, for the people of Gaza, is life or death. You know, at the moment, it's life or death. Until next time.